In the small, trembling village of Lornwood, the forest was spoken of in hushed tones, as though it could hear fear and grow stronger from it. People swore they had seen a figure towering above the moss-covered trees, her silhouette cutting the sky like a broken tower. They said she wore rags the size of sails, that her footsteps shook roots loose from the soil, that her voice, when she cried, made the owls abandon their nests. Children were warned never to stray past the fence line, and hunters refused to follow wounded deer into the deeper woods. But Elias had always been different. He was a tailor, a man who listened more to fabric than to fear. He believed that every tear could be mended, every broken thing made whole again with patience and thread. One afternoon, when the sky hung low and gray, he ventured beyond the familiar path, gathering scraps of discarded cloth tangled in branches and fallen twigs. He thought of the strange rumors and wondered. What kind of loneliness could grow so large it became a legend? The earth trembled without warning. At first he believed it was thunder, but then the shadow fell over him, cool and immense. Slowly he looked up. She stood there enormous and fragile all at once, her shoulders brushing the tops of trees. Her dress was nothing more than torn fabric barely clinging to her, stained with mud and rain. Her bare feet were cracked, her dark hair knotted and wild. Yet what struck Elias most were her eyes, wide and glimmering like deep lakes shaken by wind. They were not cruel. They were filled with fear. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, her voice like distant thunder rolling over hills. "But everyone runs from me." Elias felt his heart pound, yet his feet remained rooted in place. Slowly, carefully, he bowed his head. "You look cold," he replied softly, "and that cloth you wear cannot protect you from the world. If you wish, I will make you something better. Not rags, but a proper dress. A white one." The giant girl blinked, stunned, as though no one had ever spoken kindness in her direction before. "A dress?" she whispered. "For me?" "Yes," he said, a small, steady smile forming on his lips. "For you, and it will be the finest I have ever made." A trembling, hopeful smile touched her face, and in that moment, something unseen stitched their fates, together, tighter than any thread could ever be. There was no cloth in all of Lornwood large enough to wrap around a giant, and certainly none pure enough to match the whiteness Elias imagined. Yet that did not stop him. The moment he returned to his tiny workshop, he began gathering every scrap of fabric he owned, spreading them across the floor like pieces of an impossible puzzle. He measured them with trembling hands, then measured again, staring out toward the forest where Mira waited, hidden among the hills. The task before him was larger than any tailor's dream, but he felt a quiet certainty in his chest. This was not ordinary work. This was a promise. He traveled far beyond the borders of his small world. He climbed the northern mountains, where ice clung to the cliffs like glass, and sought the legendary Silk Widow. She was a strange being, half woman, half myth, her fingers moving faster than sight itself. When he begged her for unbreakable thread, she studied his worn hands and weary eyes. "You do not sew for gold or glory," she said. "You sew for a heart that has been forgotten." She gifted him a spool that shimmered like moonlight trapped in spiral form. In silver fields, he found the moonstag and cut tufts of wool as pale as sleeping clouds. At the edge of a hidden lake, he discovered fabric washed clean by magic waters, so light it seemed to float above his palms. He carried every precious piece back with aching shoulders, driven not by strength but by love. When he returned, Mira had chosen a quiet valley far from the frightened eyes of villagers. Every evening, as the sky darkened into blue and silver, Elias stitched. He perched on tall rocks and fallen trunks, climbing ladders and hills to reach her shoulders, her waist, the edges that would fall like rivers from her frame. He stitched in the hush of night, guided by glowing moths and a soft, borrowed moon. His fingers bled. His body trembled with exhaustion, but he did not stop. When Mira noticed the thin trails of red on his hands, she gasped. "Why do you hurt yourself for me?" she asked, tears shining like dew on her colossal cheeks. He looked up at her, smiling through the pain. "Because no one ever treated you as though you deserved gentleness. And you do." Slowly, the dress took shape. Layer upon layer of shining whiteness flowed from his hands until it spread around, her like frozen waves of light. When she finally stepped into it, the valley held its breath. The fabric draped over her towering form, glowing softly in the dusk, transforming her from a creature of fear into something wondrous and sacred. Yet light like that could not stay hidden. Far away, on distant hills and castle walls, warriors saw the glow rising against the night sky. They squinted, fearful and confused. "A giant stands in white," they murmured, and the echoes of armor and marching feet began to stir the earth. The valley filled with the thunder of footsteps, not one pair, but thousands. Warriors poured over the surrounding hills in shining waves of iron and leather, banners snapping in the rising wind. Horses snorted and stamped, unsettled by the glowing figure in the center of the land. Bows were drawn, spears leveled, swords lifted until the air itself seemed sharpened. They had crossed kingdoms to destroy what they believed was a monster, a towering curse dressed in strange white light. Mira stood frozen, her enormous hands pressed against her chest as if trying to keep her own, heart from shattering the ground. The beautiful dress Elias had made for her rippled like a living cloud around her legs. Tears filled her eyes. "They have come to end me," she whispered. "No," Elias said, stepping forward, placing himself between her and the countless weapons aimed her way. Compared to her, he was no more than a blade of grass, yet he stood as firmly as a wall. "They have come because they do not understand. Let me speak to them." His voice carried through the valley, carried by the same magic that had washed the cloth and strengthened the thread. "You call her a monster because she is large," he cried. "But tell me, how large is cruelty? How large is hatred? Those are the true giants of this world, and they wear your faces." A ripple of hesitation passed through the front lines. "You sharpen your blades for a girl who has known only loneliness," he continued. "Who hides so she will not frighten you? Who cries so softly the forest must lean in to hear her pain? If that is what you call a monster, then what do you call yourselves?" Silence spread, unsettling and heavy. Elias turned toward Mira and knelt, his hands still scarred, his fingers wrapped in faded cloth. "I did not make your dress only to cover your body. I made it to show the world your soul." He reached into his pocket and revealed a small ring braided from the same moon silver, thread that held her gown together. "Will you marry me?" The earth seemed to hold its breath. Mira slowly bent her knees, lowering herself until her face was level with his, tears falling like gentle rain. "I thought I was born to be alone," she whispered. "But you saw me, yes, 1,000 times, yes." As the ring touched her finger, the dress burst into radiant light that spilled across the valley, washing over every warrior. In a heartbeat, they saw her memories, the stones thrown, the names spit at her, the long nights of silence and wishing. They felt her loneliness, her kindness, her longing for a simple touch. Swords fell from trembling hands. Armored knees met the ground. Then, one by one, the warriors began to cheer. They did not come to slay a giant. They had come to witness a miracle. And in that field of humbled steel and blooming white cloth, a tailor and a giant girl were joined as one, while the world at last chose love over fear.